has now been around for 3 seasons, and coaches everywhere are saving time and being more efficient when it comes to scout cards. Coach Robinson from Texas says, "The thing I most enjoy is the ease of access to all the scout cards and how I can draw on them if I need to make any changes. Every coach that uses it says that it is so great to use. If you and your staff are tired of the old ways of preparing and using scout cards, check out thecoachpad.com to start enjoying Scout Team and making the 2023 season better than ever."
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we had the head football coach at York High School in Virginia, Coach Doug Pereira. Coach, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Coach.
No problem, Coach. It's good to have you on. But like I do with most of my guests, how do you end up as the head football coach at York High School?
So my coaching career started in New Hampshire, actually. My wife and I met up there and got married up there. And my first 6 years of coaching were in New Hampshire, where I worked through the JV ranks at a couple of schools and then became the defensive coordinator at a school for 4 years. We went to a state semifinal game and a state championship game in 2 of those 4 years. By the way, that school ran the double wing. They ran the Hugh Wyatt version of the double wing right off the video series. We were highly successful with that offense up there. That was a lot of fun. And then my wife and I decided it was time to move to Virginia. We were both alums of Liberty University in Virginia, and we decided to get out of that cold, get somewhere where they had sweet tea and warmer weather. And we came down and spent my first 4 years in Virginia at a school called Essex High School that was highly successful. It was a smaller school, but they were very successful in football. Really enjoyed my time there. That was typical small town America football. Loved it. During that time, I was starting to really think about wanting to become a head coach and kind of started peeking around throughout the state. And literally drove by York High School one day going to visit family. My dad is actually from not far from this area, but we only came back for vacations. I didn't know much about this area. But I drove by the school one day and thought to myself, that looks like a cool place. And irony is that a month later, the position opened up, went after it. And I am now entering my 17th season as the head football coach at York High School. So been in the same place. I've only been the head coach in one place. I have all intent to retire as the head coach at York High School. I don't have any plans to go anywhere else. So it's been a good run. We've had plenty of winning seasons, had plenty of playoff runs during my time. I've outlasted all the other previous head coaches at York High School. So I'm the winningest coach at the school by quite a bit. But a lot of that just has to do with I've been there twice as long as most of all the other coaches were. So that's going to happen.
I get it, Coach. I get it.
You know.
And like, obviously you run the single wing now, but like, before we get to that part, like, why did you, you obviously have experience coaching in and being around the double wing. Why did you transition away from that? And why do you run the single wing there instead of the double wing? Obviously,
Sure.
they're like cousins of each other, but there's obviously some differences.
I think I have to give a little bit of history for this. So the double wing was in New Hampshire. When I got to Essex High School, he was a wing T, and then in my second year, we transitioned to a shotgun sort of wing T, and we spread them out, and we had a stud tailback, so we could do a lot of stuff with that team. And then when I got to York, believe it or not, my whole goal in life was to run Navy spread option. And we did that for 1 year, but I had shotgun elements in it. And then after that year, I actually moved to defensive coordinator, handed the offense over to one of my assistant coaches for the next 12 years. And during that 12-year time, we were much more shotgun spread. We would employ a tight end. A lot of gap down backer philosophies and how we ran things, but we were definitely a shotgun team, spreading teams out. And over time, there was just elements of that was starting to bother me. And what I'm finding is it has some things to do with my personality too. I'm very much system oriented in how I think, how my brain works. And so when you get into elements like double wing, single wing, whatever, those are system based offenses. And what we were doing with our shotgun over time was we were buying in heavy to the RPO stuff. And there was just games where I'm sitting on the sideline, and this has nothing to do with my assistant coach or coaches. They were doing their job and they were great. But we'd have a 3rd and 1, and the quarterback sees the pass part of the RPO, and he's pulling the ball in a 3rd and 1 and throwing incomplete passes. And I don't have a whole lot of hair to start with, but I was pulling what was left of it out and just losing my mind. And in 2016, we had a crash and burn year where we went 1-9 after like making the playoffs 6 years in a row. A lot of elements that caused that. Great bunch of kids, but they weren't the most athletic. And that's when I decided at that point, we're going to start doing something. And I actually saw the single wing in the state championship game, was immersed and just loved watching that. And then I accidentally came across the Apopka single wing highlights on YouTube with Coach Darlington down there and immediately fell in love with it. And so what we did for the next couple of years was we actually were still a spread team, but we had a single wing package that we would put in for goal line short yardage. And there was even some games where the single wing was used more just because it was working better at that particular time or whatever. And then my OC got a head coaching position that he well deserved. And he moved on. And at that point, I ditched all the old stuff and we went hardcore Apopka style single wing. In 2019, it was 100% transition. Since then, regular season, if you don't count the COVID debacle, regular season, we are 27-4 since then. If you count the COVID with a 4-game COVID year, we're 28-7, I think it is. So it's working. And it once again, it turns into the fact that it's system based. I like to tell people, I like to have the ability to run deliberate power at people, which means, more guys than they have at the point of attack. And that's really what this thing morphed into. And I still have option in my head. I've always been kind of an option guy. So we do run some option out of the single wing. We can talk about that if we want to. But the bottom line is I like snapping the ball to the ball carrier in most plays, and we're going.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we'll come back to the single wing here in a second, but like why? I mean, you said your goal was always to run the Navy option. Why was your love there for the Navy option?
Well, growing up, all right, so okay, I'm a child of the 80s in high school. So I grew up watching boatloads of Nebraska, Oklahoma, those guys running the eye bone and the wishbone. I just fell in love with the option as a kid and always liked it, and then you had the 1990s where kind of the option went bye-bye, except for maybe Air Force. And then when the spread option started coming out, the shotgun, with the quarterback read, stuff like that in the late 90s, oh my gosh, I jumped on that real hard. But I've always been a big fan of academy football, all 3 of them. I've been to games at all 3 places, outstanding place to watch a game. But that offense to me is just amazing to watch, and it's amazing to be a part of. So, here's what we found out. I had a very good quarterback, but I realized pretty quickly I'm going to have a very good quarterback every year. And just like with the shotgun spread, in the RPO based offense, we were blessed with some good quarterbacks, but we had one back in 2011 that was just ridiculous. And we really built the offense around what he could do. And what we found in the next 5 or 6 years was he was kind of a special one. The others couldn't quite do it like he did. And I just became more immersed in the idea of not being quarterback based. I wanted to be system/team based. And that's what, the single wing kind of offers, and the double wing, and even the Navy option, really.
Yeah, no, I get it, Coach. Kind of, I think I'm kind of with you there. I have, I think, 2 of the 3 academy shirts. I mean, we were talking a little bit, like I'm wearing a Virginia shirt right now. I have like 30 different college shirts. I have 2
Yeah,
of them. Oddly, I don't have a Navy one. I have all of them. I just either I haven't been given one, or I maybe socks. Literally, my aunt got me, because I wear all kinds of weird socks too, but Navy, you
sure.
socks, and I have those. So
That's
I
cool.
get that, and I love, and like unfortunately Ken is no longer at Navy. I loved listening to him and watching everything. That is what that is. But
Yep.
and Coach
Yep.
Munkin, I love Coach Munkin as well. I mean, from
Absolutely.
some of his family, and I've talked to. Have I talked to us? I've had a member of Navy and Army on here. So
Okay.
Air Force is the one that still eluded me. But is what it is. But yeah, like I'm with you. And I mean, I love the option as well. But to your point, there's a variety of factors that kind of go into it. Um, I want to go back to your double wing experience real quick, because like
Yeah.
you, I have experience in the double wing.
Yeah.
Uh, I spent, I mean, the first year we kind of ran like a weird shotgun version of it, but the following year we were full go under center,
Yeah.
ran for almost 5,000 yards, like
Yep.
great offense. Um, I have all kinds of stuff on my YouTube channel about the double wing, both from double wing coaches, film,
Right.
all kinds of stuff. Um, kind of, I mean, for you, what do you think from your experience? Because you said you guys had a lot of success running it.
Yep.
Uh, I mean, obviously, kids. I mean, you got good kids. You can run about any offense. I think we're all good, pretty good on that. But
Absolutely.
what kind of made that offense work for you guys? Why do you think the double wing, if done correctly, can be so successful?
Oh, it's really simple. I think that the whole scheme itself is simplistic in how it works. You're what you're basically a railroad in the front side. You're pulling the backside guys around to add to the wall, and you're just going. And so what happened with us was, when I went to interview for the defensive coordinator position at that school, the head coach was a tried and true wing T guy, and I had just finished Valentin's book. So we're talking 1998, about a year after Jerry Valentin's book came out. And we're just chatting. I was like, hey, you ever heard of this stuff? And I drew up basically the superpower. And he's just sitting there, what is this? Well, next thing you know, he's got the Hugh Wyatt video series. And you're teaching 4 plays. That's really what it is. It's 4 plays. And in doing so, it's it was easy to teach. We preached it tried and true. We taught the blocking right down to the technique exactly how he taught it. We called the cadence exactly the same way. Everything was exactly the same. And so we had a video system that we could actually put in front of the kids. And that helped too. But really it breaks down to, it was more guys at the point of attack. It's a ball control style offense. So me being a defensive coordinator, obviously I loved it. There was a lot of times our defense wasn't on the field, and we kind of have our single wing trying to do the same thing. So when you control the ball, and when you're getting multiple first downs in a game, not necessarily touchdowns, but first downs, you own that game, and that's really what happened, and that's why we were pretty successful with it.
Now, obviously, you like we kind of said at the beginning, you're single wing, and we'll now kind of start hitting on some of that.
Yeah.
Uh, for some reason, I think your part of the country, the single wing, has a little niche. Like I say all the time, the Minnesota, Michigan, um, Wisconsin area
Yep.
has that weird power T double wing group.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're both pretty prevalent. Parts of Ohio have some of the double wing stuff. The power T's kind of left the area, but
Yep.
it's there. I like when I talk to single wing guys, a lot of them are in the Virginia, the Carolina area.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start there. Why do you think the single wing is so prevalent in your part of the country, compared to, say, instead of a bunch of people running the spread or true wing T or even the option?
It's a good question. Yeah, so we can talk that the single wing is prevalent in Virginia. I would estimate of 340 teams or 340 schools in the state, maybe 8 of us run it. So it's not as much as you think, but that's still prevalent compared to other states. Virginia's an interesting state, and I don't want to get real detailed into this, but Virginia basically has three parts. You got Northern Virginia, which is all the DC people. You got Southwest Virginia, which is literally a bunch of country people out there. And then you have where we are in the Tidewater, which is just a mixed bag of everything with a heavy military influence. And so as a result, you see all kinds of stuff. So like we don't have conferences here. We have what's called, we call them districts. So like the district I play in and coach in, believe it or not, is heavy wing tee oriented. But if you cross the bridge down here and go to Virginia Beach, and there's like 30 schools down there, they're all spread, every one of them. So like when one of them come up to play us in the playoffs, they don't know what they're looking at. And it gets really interesting for us in the playoffs. We've beaten a couple of schools in the past few years who were easily more athletic than we were, faster, bigger, stronger, whatever, and we were still able to handle them because they just didn't know what to do. So I don't know that it's a prevalence thing so much in the South. That there are some tried and true guys down here who've been doing it forever, like Louisa High School. Stanton River got really good at it. They're the ones that I saw, and kind of caught my attention. But we kind of still feel like almost like Darlington down in Florida, where he was kind of the guy running it. I'll say this, in the 7 years that we've used it, at least as a little bit, I have yet to face a team that runs it. I have not faced one team yet. Now I know the day is coming, but we haven't actually had to defend it, thank God. So that's kind of where we are with that.
Yeah, I get it. Like, and part is like, because I've talked to a couple people throughout there who either see it or have coached in it in Virginia. And then obviously I know Coach Teague just got hired at a school in Virginia, and he ran it forever down south.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, like, when I hear it, like, obviously Apaka is one of the big ones that everybody knows. Like when you hear single wing, Teague gets another one. But then after that, I start thinking, I just go straight to Virginia and like some of the Carolina schools that run either the single wing or the shotgun double wing, which really is like a redheaded stepchild cousin of the single wing, because it's the shotgun double wing is trying to combine essentially the single wing and the other center double wing.
Correct.
Kind of a happy medium marriage, and it's I get arguments with all the time if that's single wing, double wing, like that's a whole nother conversation. But
it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't mean to interrupt you here, but you're absolutely correct. And like here, while we're single wing, we still will spread. But there's two things that make me call us a single wing team. One, the big difference between a double wing and single wing is we've got that blocking back, the sniffer back. That's a whole different element of that from the guy sitting behind the quarterback. It changes things, gives me an extra blocker at all times. But then the other thing with it is we're always unbalanced by nature. So, my tight end, I never cover my tight end up. He's always on the weak side, but for all intents and purposes, he's just another tackle that we can throw to. So that's kind of where the difference is. We want to be unbalanced, where the double wing lives in being balanced. And, that's where things can get interesting. I love the fact that being unbalanced, teams have to decide, all right, who's the true center now? Are we going to move to the next guy? Are we going to stay where we were? But we are almost never a double tight single wing. I do that wide receiver flex thing, about 2 or 3 yards flex with a wing back inside of them. That creates that gap that they have to decide what they're going to do with too. I love that.
Yeah. And then my next question is, obvious. I think a lot of the wing tee, single wing, double wing, shotgun double wing, power tee crew get a lot. There's a lot of misconceptions, just like kind of like the spread too. The spread is
totally.
You're in the spread, you're just going to throw 85 times, which is not true.
Right.
And the same thing for the single wing and double wing is, you're just going to run the ball. Like what, especially when you're talking to kids about coming out, what misconceptions do you have to deal with, or parents, or really just anybody, when you talk to them about your offense? What misconceptions do you usually have to deal with?
not many now, but early on when we first employed it, the misconception that we don't have any wide receivers. And we're not, since we're not spread out, we're not going to throw the football. And what I can tell you is after spending all these years with receivers sitting out in space, trips, doubles, whatever you want to call it, any of those elements, there's more flexibility in the pass game from the single wing than there ever was in the spread. I know that sounds weird, especially in play action, but I feel like we're way more versatile with what we can do with the offense now than we could conventionally spread out. And so, we may not throw the ball as much as some people. We still throw it a good 10 times a game. There's a lot of spread teams that throw less than that. But when we throw, and the single wing coaches will say the same. When we throw, we're throwing the score. In other words, we've drawn the defense in. Now we're going to go over the top, just like the option teams do and all that kind of stuff. It's either that or, we've gotten pretty good at hitting the flats and doing some things that way to get us a short, guaranteed pass that we can turn into something. So the misconceptions were there a little bit early on, but we were winning. And so I haven't had to answer a whole lot to it. And I've been pretty fortunate in that regard.
Good. Now, like, I'll ask this because there's a lot of rabbit holes you can down, but for people who might, and like, obviously by the time this comes out, we'll probably be midway through the fall, but
Sure.
as people look into maybe after the season or people start getting jobs or various want to make changes, how do you recommend people go about? Obviously, Teague's got some of his stuff on YouTube, and I think he's got a couple Coach's Choice or something. Besides that, what resources do you? I mean, obviously, people can contact you, but where do you go for resources for the single wing, or when you started it? How do you suggest people go about that aspect of, okay, I want to look at this to possibly install this?
All right, for me personally, it was Darlington all the way. He has a whole video series, and I went straight through the video series. Then in 2018, my wife and I took a trip to Florida. I went down and visited with him one afternoon, watched a summer practice and a summer workout, which we bought into the whole workout system they have too. It's awesome. But that's where I went. But since then, there is a single wing fraternity out there. They call them the Single Wing Conclave, and each year they do a clinic, a symposium they call it. I spoke at the one back in 2020, 4 days before COVID hit. Thank God it was 4 days before. I didn't want to get caught in Pennsylvania, but there's a fraternity that Teague is a big part of now. And each year they do a conclave. So I've spoken twice at those now. And the guy that runs that has got a boatload of videos that he puts on the internet for us to be able to have access to. You can find some things on YouTube if you just type it in. It's funny, if you type in single wing, it starts off with that Apopka single wing highlight film. That's 13 minutes of magic. And that goes back to when Darlington first ran it. I mean, it wasn't even in his best years. His best years, 2014, 15, or 13 and 14. Those were some scary looking teams if you look back at them now. That was the proof in the pudding of giving them some athletes and put them in the single wing and see what it looks like then. That's mind boggling. So for me, it's all about Darlington, but there are, just like every other style of offense, there's that short list of gurus that you can go through and you can run it their way or whatever. Teague has kind of stepped up doing his video stuff. There's a guy out in Iowa, Bob Howard, who's won 1 million games out there doing his version. And that's the thing that's interesting is we can call it single wing all day, but all of us kind of have our own version of it. Even though I'm a Darlington disciple, there's still elements of what I do that's mine. It's not his. Matter of fact, he texted me back in the winter and he goes, "Hey, check out the play I ran scored a touchdown in the playoffs. And he's like, I stole it from you. And I looked at the play and I was like, I got Rick Darlington taking stuff from me. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. But sure enough, yeah, it happened. So
Okay. That okay. So then building off that, what sets yours? Do you, at least from your perspective, apart from say Rick Darlington or a Coach Teague or anybody else? Like I said, if everybody's got a little bit of different elements, what kind of sets your single wing apart from others?
whew, it's extremely close to Darlington, but I do a little more option than he does. If Rick wants to go option, he gets out of it and goes more spread or I or whatever. That's what he wants to do. Um, but there's ways that he'll run a certain play that I might run it slightly different. But when it's all said and done, it's the same verbiage, it's the same plays. A lot of our pass plays I kind of came up with myself. I didn't get them from him, but he's got 8 gazillion pass plays that I'll probably never even get my hands on. It's crazy what he has. So the fact that we're not double tight and the fact that we are not we have the spin stuff, the spinner stuff, but we don't really do it much. We kind of run our things a little differently. If I want to play act, I have the ability to call just a simple number that causes my running back and quarterback to run, do the old like a cross thing like you see in the shotgun all the time for the play action element. That I don't think Rick has that call, but he has his own version of all that. So that's kind of where we are. We're more deliberate than a lot of these single wings that have all this spinner stuff, and get really tricky. We're more there. We're coming right here. What are you going to do about it? That type of thing.
Okay. Now I'm curious because you obviously have mentioned you're a little different. There's some things you do differently and adding option. I got two main questions left for you. Is one, what is your typical install process or schedule or however you want to call it look like? Obviously, you have your core that you're going to install. What does that kind of look like? And then some of the other stuff you do. When do you decide to sprinkle it on from year to year? What's kind of an iffy play? Like, I mean, like we talked a little bit of wing T before we started. Whereas I might one year be really, let's just say down heavy. Next year we might not be because of a variety of factors, or jet, the difference between jet and rocket, or buck belt. Like, you get my point. Like, what are the core you install every year? What's that process look like? And then what are your kind of fringe, and what kind of determines that?
All right. So it changes a little bit each year based on experience and who we've got, just like anybody else. I will tell you, I learned something from the guys from Stanton River. There's two brothers, Tyler Ferris and Jay Ferris. And by the way, both of them, especially Tyler, he's a state champion West Virginia head coach now, running the single wing. To me, he's one of the gurus. But he taught me this thing he calls DKPs, which stands for down, kick out, pull. And all it is in our offense, there's 9 base running plays, from the strong side to the weak side. And so when we do our install, it all starts and ends with the 9 base plays, and then the primary play actions off of those, which is only a handful of play actions. I teach my play actions in a way that our quarterbacks actually have to do the correct look in the play action. So, like for instance, we have a jump pass. They got to practice the jump pass. We have the old Tebow where you lean over look like you're going to run the ball, lean, stand up. We practice that. And that's how we kind of go about things. We put them in circuits for that stuff. The other thing with the base 9, these DKPs, all it is kind of like what you start practice with. It's not against air, but it's typically 15 minutes against a defense with bags, and they run in different. We'll have 2 or 3 defenses going, usually 2, and they'll run in a couple of different defensive sets. And we're just going to run like maybe the power and the sweep to the strong side for 15 minutes straight. Then the next day, it's all the interior stuff. And then the third day, it's all the backside, the counters and all the backside sweeps and that sort of thing. But we'll stay one side, one area for the entire 15 minutes. So they'll get massive amount of reps against what we hope would be a lot of defensive sets lined up in the correct spot, and we're hitting bags. And and the communication comes into play with that. The guys ought to know what they're doing. Footwork ought to be done right. All those types of things. So we really go heavy on that in the first week, and then we don't go away from that. We open every practice with that throughout the season, minus the walkthrough day. And then as we're working through the first week, I'll start to trickle in the option. And for us, it's speed option. I had a quarterback last year that could run the veer, or we had our own version of the veer. You got me going the other day listening to these option guys. I think I'm going to go outside veer this year to my 2 tackle side. I messed around with that literally 2 days ago and loved it. So that's probably happening.
You're welcome.
But it was, I forget what coach it was. It was one of those dudes down in South Carolina that you were talking to, and you had asked him, how do you coach up the read? And he said that he doesn't. The quarterback 9 times out of 10 already knows what he's going to do. And I was like, that's the answer. We're not an option team 100%. Let's let the quarterback play the game. Let him do his thing. Let him hand it off for a little bit. And then now we move on. But understand, when I say quarterback, our single wing, like a Popka, has our guys staggered. So the center snaps the ball down the middle. We don't have snap points like some of those single wing teams. He snaps down the middle every time, and one of my 2 guys steps in and gets it. But we have the ability to take our fullback / quarterback and slide him behind center, and then take the A back and sidecar him to either side. And so that's where the option comes in. That's where we have the ability to do that type of stuff. We're messing right now with midline a little bit. We've run midline before, but right now we're messing with it in that our ISO play could be an A gap or B gap play, and we're dumb enough to call it as it is sometimes. Our blocking back makes the call and he leads through, but we're fooling around with the idea of let's still run it, but it's now a handoff scenario, and the quarterback pre-snap reads, where's that D tackle? Is he in a 3 like we want him, or is he in a 1, or is he shaded on the center? And all it does, it predetermines the running back's going to be the A gap runner, the quarterback's going to be the B gap runner. And so we're going to have them cross face, but we're still blocking it. We're thinking maybe that'll freeze a linebacker a little bit. So, because ISO to us is part the Red Sea, run the blocking back through, run the quarterback through. We're going to ISO the backer, and we're just getting at them. Well, why not have that scenario and still block the guy, or have a call where we don't block that 3 technique and we'll go ahead and read it as the season progresses? That's kind of what we're messing with a little bit right now.
Okay. And then my last question is, because I'm always curious about how people approach practice, what is a typical practice for offense look like for you?
Yep.
Especially early on. Like, obviously, in season's always a little different. You're shortening stuff.
Yep.
You're fine-tuning stuff. Like, I'm talking earlier, maybe not day 1, but like day 5, like just something early on in the summer or 2 days. What is a typical offensive practice look like for you?
Well, so in the summer, when we have our workouts, we add a little practice element to it where we actually practicing. That's really what it breaks down to. So when we get into August, we feel like we're kind of rolling. But my typical practice looks like this. We always have pre-practice, and we're going to concentrate more on our pre-practice this year with our quarterbacks and receivers getting their throwing done during that time. And then right after either before or after we stretch, we usually do about 10 minutes on air. Then we'll hit those DKPs I talked about. And then, we're your typical Indies group team, element type team. But honestly, being a system-based offense, Indies works great for the O-line. You got to have that. But for the backfield guys and the skill guys in general, we're part of a package. So a lot of our Indies are kind of tied into our plays. And what I'm concentrating on even more this year is when I go Indies with the running backs and quarterbacks, I'm going to build drills into the play itself. So for instance, if we run a sweep, they're going to catch the snap. They got to practice that. They're going to run their sweep. They're going to read their block. But then as they make their cut and get downfield, they're going to, maybe there's a stiff arm involved. If we run power, they got to climb a couple of bags. Once they get through the hole, maybe they have to do a shuffle step. If we run ISO, you got to go right or left based on that ISO block. And so we're building in drills to the actual play. So we would call it the ISO drill, or the name of our play, which is just a single digit number. And the drills are all based in, when we run our counter, we're going to practice the handoffs every single time, for our handoff counter. But we're also going to practice, once he's gotten the ball, there's two different ways he could go. One is a complete cutback. Another one, he's got to climb bags or whatever. So we're going to tie in all of our individual drills into the actual play itself. I think I heard a podcast that you did a couple of years ago with a guy who was saying pretty much the same thing. Oh, you know what? It was the Army fullback coach who was talking about that. And I was like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do more. But that's kind of what it looks like. And when we go group, okay, it's once again, it's running plays to perfection. I can tell you, when I was in that double wing offense in New Hampshire, I don't know if we ever did. The O-line did some indies. Obviously, the rest of us, I don't think there was ever indies. It was always just running the plays. Yeah. And I know, people were sitting there probably pulling their hair out listening to what I'm saying with that, but for us, that's what works.
Yeah.
So,
Coach, trust me, I did it. Like, we bird dogged the crap out of stuff. That's our. Mm-hmm. I mean, my kids had to get annoyed at it sometimes. It's what we've done this summer, and part of it, they've never done it before. But like, I've been so meticulous with footwork. Whether we're in group, pod, indie, like a lot of our stuff before we go full speed is 2 or 3 reps of bird dogging. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. Like I said, everybody's got a different way to do it, but it's always, you might be able to steal something. Hal Mommy tells that story all the time about how they went to recruit the kicker down in Florida. It was really an excuse to go watch, I forget who practice.
Yeah.
They took away the 2-minute drill that they did and turned it into just pretty much their offense. And like I said, you can always steal something from somebody's practice. And I think that's why I like ask, I don't care what offense you run. There might be something in there, a way you do it, a drill, something you do really well that people can steal.
Sure.
Because again, practice is, I mean, we're one of the few sports that it's 90% practice, 10% games.
That's correct.
Whereas you look at some of these other sports, they might have 2 practices in a week and play 3 games in a week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like where we're 4 to 5 practices every week, 1 game.
That's right.
So, like I said, I think that's why it's so structurally important for us. Coaches, give Coach a follow on Twitter. All that stuff will be in the bio. Trying to think if I miss anything else before I do the rest of my spiel. I don't think so. So, like I said, give them a follow on Twitter. All that stuff will be in there. Like, share, subscribe, all that lovely jazz. That stuff does help people find the videos, especially commenting and liking the videos. That way people can find this and anything else we do pretty easily. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. They're finishing up our 2nd year as a sponsor for us, so I appreciate all that. And I think that's about it. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate you. And that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer Podcast.